Happy Wednesday, boys and girls. I'm back again to read you the next chapter from our read aloud. Yesterday we read Tansy's Tantrum, and today we are going to read chapter 8, Clover's Magic. So I want you to remember, yesterday I asked you to make a prediction about what you thought the chapter was going to be about. So I'm asking you to put that in your head, and as I read, I want you to see if what actually happened in chapter 8 is what you predicted to happen. And again, while I'm reading, I want you to get real comfy, and I just want you to listen. Since we are not face-to-face and we can't have that interactive discussion, I just want you to sit and I want you to listen as I read. And just visualize in your mind, picture that you might be Clover and you are there at the magical pet adoption agency, and you're looking and helping and watching all of these different magical animals. So again, just get comfy and just listen to my voice as I read, and just enjoy the read aloud. Chapter 8, Clover's Magic. The agency felt quiet after the leprechauns left. The unicorns were usually still, not even swishing their tails. The magic kittens were also acting oddly, not sleeping or bounding around their cage, but instead sitting perfectly in a row, except for Twister, who was standing on his head. A single spark sputtered from Lightning's tail, and Blizzard's eyes were flashing, but no beam shot out. Cloudy bobbed an inch above the bottom of the cage. Maybe it's the coming storm, thought Clover. Indeed, the agency was starting to cool down as clouds covered the sky, and so she put away the fans. Still, she wasn't sure if it was just the storm. Something was different about the agency. There was a new emptiness, a silence that hadn't been there before. Even Dippity was acting strange. Keeping watch at the front door, his tail bristled, his ears pricked. But Clover didn't realize what it was until the rain started spattering down on the agency roof, and she took an umbrella out to the gnome. He wasn't just in a different spot, he was in a different position too. He was standing in the middle of the open gate, one arm raised and pointing down the path that led to the woods. In the dust, which was slowly being speckled by the rain, Clover could see Leonard's and Lulu's footprints, and some other prints too. Some paw prints. They looked just like a puppy's. Right away, Clover knew. She had asked the gnome to watch out for the creature from the egg. She had asked him to alert her if it left, and it had, but it hadn't escaped through a window or a door. Lulu had taken it with her. She had taken the little animal that had hatched from the egg, the little animal that Clover hadn't seen in the pen or the trap or anywhere, because of one simple fact. It wasn't imaginary. It was invisible. That's why she couldn't find it. That's why the shell had seemed to be empty, and the trap too. That's how the wish book was destroyed right under her nose. And that's why Mr. Jams couldn't figure out what the hatchling might be. Clover had never heard of an invisible puppy before. In fact, Clover had never heard of invisible animals at all. She was tingling. She was so excited. But Clover had let the puppy leave with Lulu. Let him escape. She had to get him back. Oh, thank you, gnome, thank you. She popped the umbrella over him, then raced back inside. There was no time to lose. Leonard had told her they lived on Rainbow Lane. She checked Henry's file to find out the house number. Number 7, Rainbow Lane, The Meadows. There's a sign in the woods that points to the meadows, thought Clover. That should lead me there. After digging out another umbrella from the storage room and making sure that everything, including the animals, was safe and secure, she found a small leash in the tack room, then searched the kitchen for a treat that a puppy might like. Regular puppies, she knew, would still be drinking milk. But regular puppies didn't hatch from eggs. She saw a bin in the cupboard labeled 3-headed dog. Biscuits, which was filled with bone-shaped treats in 3 different flavors, goose, pheasant, and potato. With one of each in her pocket, she was about to leave when a flash lit up from the room, and a moment later she heard a terrible crack, like a giant firework exploding. She jumped. A thunderstorm, thought Clover with a shudder. She didn't like thunderstorms. She never had. When she was little, she'd hidden under the bed. She wasn't quite so scared of them now, but still, her heart was pounding. Thunderstorm or not, though, she had to get the puppy back, but her feet wouldn't move. Meow. She heard Dippity close by, then felt his tail brush her legs. She looked down at him as he wove a figure 8 around her. Now, Dippity, she said. There was another flash followed by an even louder crack. Clover jumped, but this time she didn't feel scared. She really didn't. Dippity, you calmed me. That must be your magic. She bent down and gave him a hug. She opened the door and he started to follow her. You can't come with me, but I'll be okay, thanks. Dippity's tail curved like a sideways smile. She smiled back at him, then shut the agency door and turned the enter sign to close, even for royalty. As she popped open the umbrella, she noticed that it had a bite taken out of it. A bite far bigger than a puppy's. It wouldn't provide much protection, but she shouldered it bravely and trudged forth. The gnome was back in his usual position beside the gate, except the hand that had been pointing down the path was now holding his umbrella. Unbitten, Clover noticed. Rain fell steadily, and she could see his boots were already splashed with mud. Can you watch the agency for me? She asked. The gnome blinked. Thank you. I've locked the door. I won't be gone long, I hope. Then she headed off, walking as fast as she could, with a quick glance back at the agency, which was, as always, slightly lopsided, covered in vines, and most of all, full of surprises. Every day when she left the agency, Clover followed the same path from Dragon's Tail Lane, through the woods and out to her village, and had only ventured from it once. When she rescued Dippity from Miss Wickety, although it hadn't been so long ago, just a few weeks, it felt like months had passed. As she reached the signpost and the arrow that had pointed to the meadows, she suddenly wished she had asked Mr. Jams for a map or a tour of the woods and beyond. What if the meadows was a long way away? But Leonard and Lulu had walked, hadn't they? So it couldn't be too far, or so she hoped. Already, the chewed-up umbrella was proving useless. Her hair was drenched. The trees did little to stop the heavy rain, and the wind had picked up, sending small twigs and leaves skittering above like mice. Even though the thunder crashed, she stayed calm. Thoughts of the puppy kept her going. She saw a man dressed all in green like Leonard, with a golden umbrella, hurrying down the path. He must be a leprechaun too, thought Clover. Excuse me, she said. Is this the way to Rainbow Lane? If you have to ask, I can't tell you, he said, glancing briefly up from his umbrella, then continuing on his way. Clover trudged on. Before long, she came to a sign that said, Rainbow Lane, houses 1 through 50 this way. And indeed, around the bend, the path grew wider and the trees thinned, opening up to a neat semicircle of houses that reminded Clover of little golden pots. The rain pinged noisily off their metal roofs, and the wind tore at their gates and shutters and nearly ripped the umbrella from her hand. Beyond the houses stretched a sea of green grass, whipped by the wind. The meadows, boulders dotted the landscape, half hidden in grass and mist. It was the perfect place for the unicorns to roam, and Clover wondered if there were any unicorns that lived in the wild. Mr. Jams had once told her about wild dragons, but not wild unicorns. She would have to ask him sometime. But first, number 7, Rainbow Lane. Number 7 was the merriest looking of the houses, with a crooked chimney and bright green shutters that seemed to be smiling despite the storm. Clover's heart was pounding again, but this time with excitement. In moments, she would finally meet the little animal that had hatched out of the egg. She knocked on the tiny door. "Who is it?" came an unfamiliar voice from inside. "It's Clover from the Magical Animal Adoption Agency. I'm looking for Leonard and Lulu." Oh, the door clicked open to reveal a plump and pretty woman dressed in a light green dress with a green apron and green slippers. Her eyes were amber gold like candlelight, the kind of eyes that made you feel warm inside. "Oh dear, you're soaked. Come in, come in. Leonard and Lulu told me all about you. I'm Marigold, Lulu's mom." Clover closed her umbrella and ducked, dripping, into the most cozy, comfortable, and colorful living room she had ever seen. Each wall was painted in a different, vibrant color. So too was each cushion and chair in a different hue. It was like walking into a rainbow. As she watched, she saw that one of the walls was slowly fading into another color. Marigold saw her surprise. "It's rainbow-made paint. Rainbows are full of such amazing magic, aren't they?" "We haven't had any rainbows for a long time. Thank the skies for this storm, though I wish it wasn't so strong. Poor Leonard, he's out right now harvesting." "Harvesting?" "Harvesting the rainbows, of course," said Marigold. "He'll be out for a while. I'm sorry." Although Clover was curious about the rainbow and how they were harvested, she replied, "That's okay. Really, it's Lulu I need to speak to." "I'm afraid she's a little upset right now," said Marigold, "but let me get her. She's with her new fairy horse. Just make yourself at home. Don't worry that you're damp." While Marigold hurried out of the living room, Clover looked around. She couldn't see any sign of a puppy, but of course that was part of the problem. Marigold emerged a few minutes later with a very sad-looking Lulu. "Hush now," Marigold was saying to Lulu. "I told you that it's not real. Papa told you too." Then to Clover she said, sit down. Can I fetch you some tea or hot chocolate?" "Hot chocolate, please," said Clover, taking a seat on the couch, which was slowly changing from red to orange. Marigold bustled off to the kitchen, and Lulu sat down next to Clover. Close up, Clover could see Lulu's glasses were all wet, and tears streaked down her cheeks. "Are you okay?" Lulu sniffed. She took off her glasses and wiped them, then looked across the room and smiled briefly before replacing them. Clover wondered if that's where the puppy was, but she couldn't see anything. A knot formed in Clover's stomach. She had let Lulu adopt the puppy. What if Lulu was upset because she knew Clover could come back for it? Clover could easily imagine how awful it would be to get a new pet and then have to give it up right away. "Lulu," she started in her gentlest voice, "I'm here about the puppy. It wasn't ready for adoption yet. I made a mistake. We didn't get a chance to fill out the paperwork or anything. I need to take it back." Lulu shook her head. "It's still really just little, like a baby," Clover tried to explain. "You can come later and adopt it if you want, if your parents say it's okay. In fact, I think you would be a great owner. But right now, will you show me where it is?" Lulu shook her head even harder. "Please, Lulu, it's really important. I promise that you can come later and adopt it if you want. Please, show it to me." "He's gone," wailed Lulu, just as her mom entered with a tiny tray of steaming cocoa. "Now, Lulu, I told you no more about that puppy." Marigold turned to Clover. "I am so sorry. It's Lulu's imaginary puppy. Lulu insists that it ran out into the meadows when it heard the thunder because it was scared. I tried to tell Lulu not to worry, Marigold sighed. Lulu's always seeing things that no one else can. I wish I had a vivid imagination. Actually, it's not just her imagination, Clover began. Marigold looked confused. What do you mean? I mean that... But Clover saw Lulu shaking her head and pointing outside. Clover understood. It would take too long to explain everything. The puppy needed them. I'll have to tell you later, she said. Right now, I have to find the puppy, and I could really use Lulu's help. Could she come with me? I'll take good care of her. Boom. Thunder crashed. Marigold jumped, the cups rattling. She set the tray down on the table. The storm is far too fierce for chasing a puppy, whether it's real or not. Even experienced rainbow harvesters like Leonard are going to be having a tough time. Why don't you stay for a nice cup of cocoa, dear, until the sun comes out? I can't, said Clover. I really must find the puppy, and Lulu's the only one who can help me. Lulu looked hopefully at her mother, but Marigold shook her head. I'm sorry, she said. Lulu's lower lip began to tremble. Don't worry, Lulu. I'll find him, I promise. Clover stood up. Oh, dear, dear, sighed Marigold. Well, if you must go out, then you should take this. Marigold handed Clover a rainbow-colored umbrella. Yours looks like it has been through many hard times. It's seen better days. Thank you, said Clover, taking it. She was about to leave when she thought of something. Lulu, what's his name? Just Puppy, said Lulu. I haven't named him yet. The storm was a monster now. Thunder, rumbling, wind screeching. At last, Marigold's bright umbrella, although small, was keeping Clover dry, unlike the other one. The minute she stepped off the path and into the muddy meadows, however, her shoes were soaked. The meadows looked like the sea and felt like it too, wet and endless. For all she knew, the puppy might be in front of her. Far in the distance, through the mist, she could see a wall rising like a swell on the horizon. Puppy, here, puppy, she called. Clover whistled as loudly as she could above the wind. She reached out her hand, hoping to feel him. She even squinted her eyes, hoping she might see something, but she didn't. She kept going around the boulders through the grass. She came to a particularly marshy section and tried looking for paw prints in the mud. But if there were any, the rain had already washed them away. Puppy, puppy, here, puppy, she called until her voice was hoarse, but the wind drowned her out. She trudged on, sinking down in the mud, nearly losing a shoe. She had just reached it when the wind snatched Marigold's umbrella from her hand, flinging it away in a swirl of colors. Up, up, and out of sight. It wasn't even hers to lose. Within seconds, she was truly soaked. Her thin summer dress clung to her body and her shoes made slurpy sounds. Her hair was blowing into her eyes and she wiped it away, forgetting that her hand was covered in mud from pulling her shoe out of the muck. Now there was mud in her hair and on her face. Puppy, here, puppy, she called desperately. Boom, replied the storm. At last, Clover reached the crumbling stone wall at the end of the meadow. It was only slightly taller than her, but still high enough to block her view of what lay beyond and stretched as far as the eye could see to the right and to the left. The wall was too high for a puppy to get over, but it did provide some shelter from the wind. Maybe the puppy was huddled up against it. Flash! A bolt of lightning lit up a hole between some of the stones. It was just big enough for a large puppy or a small girl. Clover squeezed through. The last bit was tight. Puffing, she emerged to a terrible sight. The wall didn't mark the end of the meadows. Below her, stretching out as far as she could see, were more meadows, 10 times larger than where she'd already been, with trees and boulders and grass. She would never be able to search it all. She would never find the puppy, even if she could see him. Crack! A zigzagging bolt of lightning struck one of the trees in the distance. The tree fell over with a sickening crash. Clover jolted and tripped over a rock. She tried to catch her balance, but slipped and slid down the slope into the meadows. Oh, she cried, down, 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 until thump. She landed at the bottom in a muddy, miserable heap. She felt very alone and very scared. If only she had Lulu's magic to see the invisible puppy. If only she had magic of any sort. Suddenly, all she wanted was her parents, a warm bath, and Dippity on her lap. Tears filled her eyes. She got up and stumbled to some nearby boulders. Two leaned together, forming a little cave. She crawled into the dry space, wet and trembling. She thought of the puppy, how he too must be wet and trembling. She imagined him curled up in a little ball, shivering and scared. If she couldn't find him, if she gave up, would he die? The thought was too terrible. Clover began to cry harder. It was hopeless, ridiculous. Really, searching for something that you can't even see? She should just give up, but she couldn't. But she wasn't magic. But maybe she didn't need to be. Maybe it didn't matter. What really mattered was that she loved the magic animals, so she would never give up, even when things were tough, and things did get tough, like right now. But she had figured out Dippity's magic and found homes for Coco and Hickory. A litter of kittens was safe and sound because of her. A fairy horse loved her so much that it didn't want to be adopted. She would find the lost puppy. She felt it in her heart. And just as she felt it in her heart, that's when she felt it beside her too. And so, boys and girls, that was the end of chapter 8. Tomorrow is chapter 9, which is Sense, Not Spells. So what I want you to do, I want you to tell your mom or your dad if what you predicted yesterday is really what happened in chapter 8. So whatever you predicted for Clover's Magic, was your prediction correct? I also want you to share with your parents or your brother or sister or grandparents, babysitter, whoever you might be with today. I want you to share with them what was your favorite part of this chapter. And then sometime today or tonight, think about what you think might happen tomorrow when we read chapter 9, Sense, Not Spells. And also think about that invisible puppy and what you think, what role it may play in this story. So until I see you again tomorrow for our next chapter, I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope you stay safe. I hope you enjoy being around your families. And just remember that I miss each and every one of you. And from the bottom of my heart to your heart, stay positive, stay happy, and just remember, I'm thinking about each and every one of you. Bye.